and think how wonderful it is that we have all the conditions coming together very nicely for us to be here. I'm particularly rejoicing from all the efforts of everybody yesterday, all our dear Dakas and Dakinis, for completely, what do we say, doing a deep clean of our Gompa in preparation for Losar, the Tibetan New Year, which is on next Saturday. So gearing up for the Tibetan New Year, which also happens to be also Chinese New Year and Vietnamese New Year. So from time to time in our astrology converges and we have on the same day. So that is wonderful. And then I saw, I just saw it again this morning, but I saw it previously. Christmas Island separates, even though it's part of Australia, right? It celebrates the New Year, I think on the 17th, like the week after. Isn't that interesting? They have their own special New Year. So, of course, then there's, the Greek Orthodox one comes along much later. And yeah, so lots of time for celebration. So it was just so wonderful. I was really inspired by, particularly, we had we had a few Tibetan families helping us, which was really delightful because, they get the thing about creating merit and they just love this Gompa. So any reason to be here. So keep creating those causes. I always think if you're in a Tibetan Buddhist center and there's no Tibetans there, there's something wrong, So I think more and more, I saw this happen in Sydney where the Tibetan community feels it's their home. And we have that similar connection with the Bhutanese community. So a really lovely thing. So I'm just rejoicing in everyone's efforts. And I don't know about everyone else. It's hard because I was here seeing it all happen. And so I come in and go, oh, isn't it just, the energy feels so great. So, but there was a woman who came in afterwards for meditation and she could feel the change in the energies. God starts all wonderful.
I think I have to be honest, it's not here, but all they do is they got into the kitchen.
Yeah.
A huge job.
They did it. Yeah, I know. You were just about the last ones here, apart from wonderful. All right, so here we are in the depths of Samsara. The module's on Samsara and Nirvana, but I think it's mistitled because a lot of it's about Samsara. No, it's not. It's the Four Noble Truths. It's not just the first two. So we're up to number 2, the origins of suffering. So when we looked at this, the little quote previously where it said the origins of suffering or the sources of suffering or the causes of suffering, so it might be translated in all those ways, are to be abandoned, or the cause is to be abandoned, but it's really more than okay. So here we have the origin of suffering as the Buddha identified as craving. So of course we talk about the innate, born with this innate grasping at a self, which we call the root ignorance, and on top of that is the mind of craving. So here's the quote from the Buddha from that first turning of the wheel, the first teachings the Buddha gave. And this monks, he was talking to monks, but we can apply it to ourselves, is the noble truth of the origination of suffering, the craving that makes for further becoming, in other words, further existence, rebirths, life, accompanied by passion and delight, relishing now, here and now there. So this is like the monkey mind grasping at, new sensory, here, there, with a passion, with delight in the senses being satisfied. Craving for sensual pleasure. So we know that any pleasure of so-called happiness on the basis of the senses doesn't last, even it lasts a whole lifetime, which is rare, but even it did, it's got to come to an end because you leave your body behind. It's all, So the sense consciousnesses get left behind. Craving for the sensual pleasures, craving for becoming, being in existence is one level of becoming, of having an existence, having a life. But we can also think of it as a craving, and we looked at that with the first aspect of the First Noble Truth, is craving at things, myself basically, as being permanent, ongoing. So one of the ways I think about that is thinking about a future life. So when we think about a future life, it may not be wrong to say that we often think about ourselves in this life continuing on, yeah, rather than some other entity that we might be in a future life, because we don't know. So, oh yeah, I'm going to continue on, as if we know we're leaving our body behind intellectually, but when we imagine that future life, what do we imagine? So that sense of permanence, craving for non-becoming. So here we could say that's the craving for, well, non-becoming literally is not being in existence. So that would be a nihilistic view. When you go, well, if things aren't permanent, nothing, you know, instead of thinking absence, when we hear selflessness, and then, you know, you've got to consider that the Buddha was around the time of the Hindu teachings where, you know, so this sense of no self, which sounds pretty freaky to me, like non-existence, but it can also refer to the fact of, you know, people who think, you know, we only have this one life, so go for it, make the most of this life because that's all we get. So that's also the non-becoming of not, if you like, returning to another existence in the future, whether or not you believe in heavens and hells and limbos and purgatories. What's the difference? Oh, limbo, purgatory, you're doomed. Limbo, you're sort of in between. We might say bardo. Maybe. It's going to make a silly joke. But it also can be non-becoming in terms of aversion for the things that don't give us pleasure. So, you know, not wanting to get sick, having the body fall apart, etc., etc. I'll just mention that one because it's quite important. As you age. Oh, I didn't bring it. Oh, that's all right. So I was looking this morning at this whole section in the Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the path to enlightenment. And there's, you know, a full-on chapter on contemplating suffering. Some of my Buddhist friends say, you are such a depressing lot. Contemplating. But thinking of the different ways in which suffering manifests. And here we're looking at the causes for all of that. And it has its own very extensive chapter as well. So we can go on, you know, here we're just doing a basic outline of it, but then you can go on and study and meditate in greater depth on this. I was mentioning that in the first week about one can never have enough teachings on the Four Noble Truths. So this noble truth must be penetrated. So, you know, analyze what the origin of suffering is. And by that leads us to abandoning the origin of suffering. So with the First Noble Truth, the Buddha said, identify, know what suffering is, and all the, you know, the three, the six, the eight, but also you go through looking at the suffering of the different realms of existence. We know about human suffering. We don't, you know, that's self-evident. We know that experience. We may not be directly aware of the experience, but what we impute on animal suffering. For example, I always think, you know, poor animals, they don't know that they're going to get better. You know, maybe they do. I'm not a vet. I'm not trained to read animals' minds. But that sense of this, so, you know, when like I'm thinking of the mammals, specifically dogs at this point, and they look so mournful. Help. Or maybe we're the same when we're sick. Some people want to be helped and some people want to be left alone. But maybe some animals are the same. Anyway, so this noble truth must be penetrated penetrated to, like the realization of the truth, by abandoning the origin of suffering. So this is where we need to look back at the first noble truth. So this is where we talked about the cause and effect. So this one is the cause, looking at the origins, and the effect is what? Suffering. In other teachings, the Buddha explains that craving and clinging, so that propels, that is said to be the causes of suffering. When we go on further, we'll look at those in the context of the 12 links of dependent origination, which is we call the wheel of life in the jaws of Yama, the Lord of Death. These fangs and these claws, wheel of life. And that we go from existence to existence, propelled by craving and clinging, and then we go clinging and grasping. So the grasping, as I said, is this grasping at an innate sense of soul, and then on the basis of that we come into existence. We'll get to that. Ignorance or delusion or confusion. So we can use the three terms synonymously in this context, which is basically our fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of ourself and reality. So this is this grasping at a permanent self or being nihilistic, you know, going to the two extremes. As the Buddha said, don't go to extremes. Middle way approach is what we've got. So here's a quote in relation to that from Dharmakirti. So Dharmakirti was one of the, you know, we talk about the great Nalanda masters at the Nalanda University. That was from about the 3rd century, Nagarjuna, up to, well, at least the 11th, 12th century, the Lama Tisha. Which is in Bihar state in India. And so his Dharmakirti was around the 6th or 7th century. And so Chenrezig Institute, they have a depiction statue. They've got a Nalanda Master's Garden with a depiction of all those. And Dharmakirti is one of the ones who's like in a debate mode. And he's like got his arm up, debating. And this quote comes from a commentary on, so he wrote the Compendium of Valid Cognition, which is all about basically what a valid mind is, and all the ways that we get to that valid mind from our incorrect mistake consciousness. So there's a whole study of that, which is like unpacked in basically awareness and awareness. It's all based on that. It's very complex, but this verse isn't. Once there is a self, there is an idea of other. Or we could say once there is a self, because so at some point, a baby, usually around between 6 and 9 months, in your doctor training, gets a sense of being separate, say, from the mother, you know, having a separate entity. That's the door. I discovered that yesterday. I discovered being in here yesterday that sound is the doorbell, which I hardly ever hear. In Sydney, we'd have the doorbell go off, and the place was a previous aged care facility. So it'd go off randomly at different times. We just decided there was a ghost in the place, and seemed to be pretty benign if it was there. But when people pressed it, it didn't seem to go off. So when you wanted it to function, it didn't function. Anyway, this one functions on pressing. Something works around it. Yeah, so having this sense of myself and other, and then we otherize, isn't it? So that we see ourselves as separate. Of course, we are separate, but we see ourselves as not being connected. And of course, we know that everything is interdependent. We know that increasingly. So, but there's, as soon as there is that sense, as Dharmakirti says, on behalf of self and other, there is attachment and hostility. This is generally said as we look after number one, so self-cherishing mind that, you know, even at the expense of others, right? And so if you do what I want and you agree with me and praise me and all of that, I'm your friend, you know, starts from an early age. You know, you see little kids at school and not being a parent or a grandparent or anything like that. It seems to be they have new best friends every week. Seems, is that right? Yeah. Because their previous best friend probably, they fall out of favour or whatever. So they've got a new best friend now. I mean, it's quite nice to have a lot of best friends, if that's not a contradiction. But we do this, you know, and hostility or aversion, it doesn't have to be, you know, violent, but aversion because you irritate me, you irritate me. This is the self and other. It's not about I am irritated, because the irritation comes from me, not from them, etc. So, and on the basis of that, that's that disconnect in associate, all the other faults come about. So all the afflicted states of mind come about. So in association to those. So of course, it comes up time and time again, this theme of recognizing an afflicted state of mind. So we talk as that root ignorance or delusion and the craving. From that come all the other disturbing states of mind or afflictions, kleshas in Sanskrit. And here it says kleshas, it means afflictions. So these are toxic states of mind, disturbing states of mind. So the sort of definition is that they are mind states of mind. When they arise, will disturb our mind stream. We can't go to sleep at night. So when His Holiness the Dalai Lama asked Daniel Goleman to, you know, with the Mind and Life conferences, Mind and Life Institute, the very first one was on this. And His Holiness said, can you, you know, bring together the mind science people, psychologists and mind science people on this topic of disturbing emotions. And Daniel Goleman went away, and 6 months later he was meeting with His Holiness and said, what do you mean by disturbing emotions? Not that he doesn't know what a disturbing emotion is, but let's get this precise. And he said destructive emotions, which just feels a bit stronger. It destroys your peace of mind. So anything that destroys your peace of mind is an affliction. So say we're in meditation and our mind gets excited by the sound of the doorbell. And so that disturbs our peace of mind. And we might say, but that disturbs it in a happy way. Yes, but it's not the object of meditation. So we look at that, or, you know, of course, the dullness of mind when we're sleepitating, meditating, and all the other usual culprits, the desirous attachment. So you know, we have to, this word attachment is a big word, But here we're talking about it in terms of that mind of craving, clinging, desirous, attachment, gotta have. Anger, so that's a whole spectrum from the slightest irritation up to rage, hostility, and hatred. Revenge, vengeance. Yes. Yes, Tracy. Yeah, yeah. Well, even in the womb, the sufferings that, because in a Buddhist understanding that life starts at conception, and that makes sense that the life starts at conception. That makes absolute sense. Not an independent life. I mean, that comes for years later, but well, actually, it would exactly at that time, because if we think about conception, you get the sperm from the dad and the ovum from the mum. But it's your mind that zaps in there, and that mind comes with its baggage from past lives. And what's the even even the most positive mind within samsara still has that innate self-grasping. So there's definitely a sense of a self. There's definitely a sense of self. And so if you see twins, even I'm just thinking of some twin friends of mine that are not identical, but they pretty much look identical. Doesn't help because they cut their hair the same way. And it's two females, so it's not like, oh, that's the boy, But they have their own personalities from birth. I didn't see those two at birth, but within my family, but there's been a few sets of twins, non-identical twins. Very distinct personality. So that doesn't come from mum and dad, because you have all the same conditions. So that can only come from your mind. So it is true, we would see that sense of self was never not there. That grasping is never not there while we're in samsara. Well, yeah. But they're not looking at that sort of subtle level that we do in Buddhism. In Buddhism, we're looking at a very subtle level of self-grasping. So what they're talking about is when you realize that you're not an extension of your mother, or that you're not the one person, you start to, I guess, within yourself, there's a sense of separation. So this is what they're saying, when that sense of separation, but already, within that time, you've created many karmic moments as well. Good. So the types of afflictions that, so generally we have these, I think this is the set of 5. Yeah. So we have the desirous attachment, the anger, the whole spectrum of that, the pride, my overinflated ego mind. And we often use the word ego to mean that, don't we? We don't just talk about a sense of self, but we talk about ego. It's sort of like, oh, you've got a big, I suppose we do say big ego. Yeah, that's that one. Looking down on others. The ignorant confusions that we're born with. The afflicted doubt. So this, I would say, comes along much later in terms of a child, because the afflicted doubt is the doubt that once you encounter a philosophy, any philosophy, I suppose, but here we're interested in Buddhist teachings. So when you encounter that, you tend to dismiss it and go, no, can't, you know, you haven't completely dismissed it, but you're, yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm not sure on the sort of, but I'm not going to go to the Dharma Centre because I'm not sure. Whereas you can have doubt going towards and just like, I'm not sure, so I want to go and find out. So there's a big difference between it. And then holding mistaken or afflicted views. So there's a number of afflicted views. Of course, you know, we looked at previously, one is holding this body-mind continuum as being permanent, as being, we can't say unchanging in the sense of it is impermanent, but, you know, holding on to me, lasting, whatever, our sense of eternalism, let's just say like that. And then not recognizing that whilst I have a body such as this, in samsara, and a mind such as this, it is already contaminated by that innate self-grasping, and then that's why all the other afflictions. So we've got a sense of purity of ourselves. It's everyone else who's to blame, isn't it? You know, I'm just, as my mother would say, goody two shoes. That's what she used to say to me. Knock you down. It was necessary. I'm very grateful. So under the influence of all these afflicted states of mind, we engage in karma. So this is saying how that plays out, which is literally means action. Actions under the influence of an afflicted state of mind, whether it's in the sort of wrong mind or mistaken mind, which leads to suffering and keeps us trapped in this cyclic existence. So next time we'll look at that wheel of life and unpack the trap. We don't realize we're trapped. Maybe we do. I mean, we are here after all. So then to look at, so just like the first noble truth, and we're looking at the second noble truth, there's 4 aspects or sub-categories in relation to that we meditate on. So the first one, the truth of origin, or the truth of causes, sources. So the first one is cause, surprisingly. So we meditate on the thought that all the actions that we do, contaminated actions, and that mind of attachment, craving, grasping, are causes because they cause all our suffering. They are the roots of suffering. And so the misconception that counteracts is the misconception that suffering is causeless. It just happened. There's no cause. I don't know why it keeps happening. There's no cause. I'm trying to think of an example of that. Well, for example, now we talk about global warming. And so the climate deniers, or whatever it is, I mean, it really is climate denial. We would say there's no cause, it just happens to be, you know, I don't know, happens to be. There's another one that's wrong causes, but this one's causeless, as if it's just, well, just is. And if it just is, there's nothing I can do about it, which is a tragic state, because there's no cause to identify. And yes, go. Yes.
The use of that understanding of it just is serious. In some ways, that tension, as you said, this is a business.
Yes.
whilst it's not necessarily accurate, someone who is going through some help, that's the mechanism to accept that current state. Is that problematic?
No, that's not problem. That's not this, because with that terrible illness that they have, they know there's causes because they've been to the doctor and the doctor said this is what you're suffering from, and this is the causes of that from a just in a conventional way. But the mind choosing not to dwell in, either the past, what you're, oh, now I can't do all those things that I did before, or even dwelling in the present in terms of being the sick person, but looking towards the future, which may also be being the sick person, but how am I going to live my life moving forward? How do I need to address this change in my life? Yeah, so that's realistic. Yeah, that's a healthy one. Yeah.
So when you're saying causeless, do you mean like something that perceives being random?
Random.
Accidents?
Yeah, exactly. The rock just fell. There was no cause for it, just fell, hit me on the head. Yes, there was a cause of my suffering, but it just fell. Okay, then origin. So the second aspect is origin. So this is where we say the truth of origin of that suffering. Why is it an origin of suffering? Because it causes that again, and it causes it again and again, produces suffering. So either within one lifetime or lifetime after lifetime. That has, as much as, us as Dharma practitioners, using this life to best to create the best causes for our genuine happiness. Until we're out of samsara, we will always experience suffering, as we looked, suffering of birth, suffering of death, inevitable. I don't think, actually, I was going to say, I don't think there's anybody who's never got sick. But then I thought of our dear friend Marlene, who, when she did get sick, and then a rapid decline, she said, I haven't been sick enough. Now, maybe she hadn't, and she hadn't, but she hadn't held on to it if she had. But she'd been very, very healthy in her life until she wasn't. So you can go, you can minimize, and that would be a ripening of amazing. If you think about Marlene and her connection with Ling Rinpoche, she's I wouldn't have a clue. I have no clairvoyance, but there are certain indicators, right? You just think, wow, way to go. Yeah. So origin being that causing of suffering again and again, producing the same suffering. Say you've got a chronic illness and you've got that suffering again and again and again. And then this one is said to counteract, so this is what we meditate on. We counteract the mind that says there's only one cause. And the example that comes to mind for me is that obsession with finding, what is it? Case 0 of COVID, that's the one cause. I mean, maybe it wasn't as simplistic as, but, I kept thinking, so once you identify that one thing, what are you going to do with it? I'm not an epidemiologist, so I don't know. They probably had a plan. But all it seemed to do is create conflict. And if it was creating conflict, then the Buddha said, well, of course it would, because it's totally out of sync with reality. I mean, the epidemiologists had already predicted we were due for a pandemic. their modelling said so, and train the people who needed to be trained. I'm not sure if it was politicians or health people or who, but to say, okay, well, we don't know what it is and when it is, but we're due. So, and it's not just because, oh, it's 100 years, it must be time for a pandemic. Look at the conditions that are arising. So there's many, many causes. Then we have strong production. In other words, that we talk about the propelling karma to propel us into existence, for example, has to be quite strong. It has to produce that, we're not just propelled into existence, but it does propel that existence that is on the basis of which produces suffering with great force. But it has to be, say, strong enough to cause that illness, for example, right? To cause an illness. So again, with COVID, you look at the fact that people in the same conditions, like families, some got, some didn't. So they had the same conditions, but there was something that didn't ripen karmically for that one, or, you know, they had their constitution was different, whatever. So externally all the same conditions, but not necessarily internally. So it's got to be strong enough to produce that result. So say one of the tendencies in your mind is towards anger, and you've done Thubten suffer retreat, you've done frustration, you've done lots of purification. And what happens as a result? It weakens the capacity of that to arise, let's say, as full-blown rage. Does irritation, frustration, etc. arise still? Most likely, but you're not going to escalate that because you've been working on your mind. And so we see that over time in our practice. So, oh, yeah, I don't react in the same way. I mean, even before I met the Dharma, even though I was brought up all singing, all dancing, performing from an early age, I would still have anxiety. A couple of times it shocked me because I wasn't prepared, because I wasn't used to it. Anxiety attacks a couple of times when I was doing presentations. And one part of me is standing there going, oh, that's the dry mouth, and that's and observing the process happening, but nothing was coming out. And all, you know, these people are looking at you going, come on. And so then I had to learn to work with that so that, you know, it doesn't happen for decades and decades. So it has to be strong enough to produce it. And what this is counteracting is the misperception that the nature of things is permanent, but changing moment by moment. So the schools of Buddhism say there is something there from its own side, that there's some essence, you know, some. The mind-only school talks about it like a consciousness that's different. I was just trying to call the name of it to mind. But there's got to be something there from its own side. So if I'm looking at an object, I'm looking at the door. Of course, there's a door there. The door is there from its own side, or at least from all the particles coming together, the wood, the tree, go back to the cloud and the rain, those who chopped and made them, you know, etc., etc. There's many, many causes for that. But then I see a permanent door, but it's changing to me. But I confuse that. Until the door ceases to function at a door, and then I realise it's not, because it's no longer a door. I can't call it a door because it's not functioning as a door. So everything has to have a form, which is, it's got the recognisable shape of a door, but not functioning as a door. So at Chenrezig Institute last year, they got, hope we bring him here, Thubten from the Amitabha Buddhist Centre, previous long-term director and great benefactor of the centre, who also is an expert in feng shui. So he was at Chenrezig Institute and he said in Gompa, on this day, this is for energy, something to do with the energy. Take the Gompa door off, like that one out there, leave it off for an hour and put it back on. So I was there when said day happened in January. Nobody had done anything about sussing out the conditions of the door beforehand. And so somebody, the maintenance guy got a call, can you just take that door off and put it back in an hour's time? And he said, I'll take that door off, the whole thing would fall apart. Like the structure, yeah. It's just like nobody had sussed it out. It wasn't functioning as a door. So interesting. It was just like, oh, the obstacles that we have, and you're trying to do the best thing and an obstacle comes. Yeah. I don't know what they've done with that. Have to replace the whole, I'm sure they have to replace the whole, it's not just the door frame, it's the whole structure there. I'm looking at paper, pushing this one to where I'm talking. At the back of the Gompa. Oh, sorry, the main, see, because I always come in the back, at the front of the Gompa.
Oh, yes, that would be very old.
Very old.
Yeah, and there are known issues with wood.
Yes,
in that
there are
area.
no issues with the wood. Anyway, that bit didn't happen, so I don't know what's done to their furniture.
Even
Yes, exactly. Correct. From its own side. There's no door from its own side because it's merely labelled door, because we've labelled a door, because for us humans, a door has a function to open and close, let's say, so we can go through or keep people out. What was that?
It's a barrier.
It's a barrier, yeah. But even then, I mean, I don't know what a bird would make of a door. Maybe they'd make it a barrier. I mean, yeah. No. It doesn't think door. Us humans think door. So that's exactly that. That's the most subtle form of the dependent origination. The mind that merely labels it. And then I've talked about this door so much when I've got an image of door in my mind. It's this one. Now it's this one. It's updated itself. And so that becomes a permanent, we call it a generic image, a permanent image of door. Was it Aristotle or one of those who talked about this sort of stuff? I haven't really studied Greek.
I suppose you could say we're like the door, except
Yes.
we do have an idea of ourselves as a human being.
Yes.
When I say as an I,
As an I. Being a human being is fine.
yeah, but as an I, we have this idea.
Mm. We have this idea of I,
Existing from
yes, and it's going to be different. So then I label you Susan, and then everybody else has a different idea. We have a different idea to your idea, because you're experiencing it on the inside. And even our own idea of ourselves, we sort of have to upgrade from time to time.
or degrade.
I prefer up. Upgrade. Upgrade. The body that's degrading. And the mind can upgrade.
I mean, things that we accomplish things we don't like to.
Yeah. Yeah. But what happens to something you didn't like and now you've discovered you do like? So then you have to upgrade that. It happens. Might go the other way as well. It does. Both happen because of impermanence. And the last one is condition or conditions, because they act as those cooperative conditions of suffering. So we always talk about causes and conditions. We've got to have both. So someone who got COVID would say the cause was the COVID virus, but the conditions were the fact that you were shut up in a house, which is the worst thing to do. Best thing to do was to let people out and about. And then, no, we're going to isolate everyone from everyone. I mean, it worked in the plague. I did see a problem about one village that during the times of the plague, completely sealed off the whole village so that they probably were the only ones, so that it didn't go beyond the walls. Nobody in, nobody out. Yeah, that's called WA. And look at we came here and we were in isolation. And when we came out of isolation, and no one took us to the shops, I'll introduce you, show you about, took us to the shops, and I went, oh, do I have to wear a mask? He says, what's a mask? Because people weren't doing that in WA before we opened up the wall. But it meant freedom inside, didn't it? Yeah, wonderful. That's called WA. So, yes. Yeah. Yes, you could say, yeah. So you're, okay, well, actually the karmic part is the, you'd say the cause. Karmic part is the cause, which wouldn't be COVID. It would be your, let's say, predisposition or the state of your health, or not wanting to say, or some past karmic moment that now is ripening for you to have met COVID. But for that to, it needs that strong production, but it needs the conditions around that to be such as that really, and that can be the locked house or the interaction with somebody who has COVID and blah, blah, blah. So they all become the conditions around that. Because many people were in the same environmental conditions, but didn't get at the same time. Or didn't get it badly. So all of those, we could say, from a Buddhist perspective, not a medical perspective, would be related to karma. You had the karma. Once it's ripened, the conditions that arise with it can either, so once the karmic seed ripens, then there's no way you're not going to, let's say, get COVID. There's no way you're going to, having COVID and having that ripen, it's not going to not be COVID. But the conditions around it can change that you don't have it so badly, or you do. Yeah. I think this will be a wonderful idea. It's not so hot today, which I'm rejoicing in, but that will change. Everything does. So what this, coming to this recognition counteracts the misperception that suffering is created by superior deity, let's say. Let's say God. God gets the rap for a lot of things. So years ago, I was on this on the moral compass, you know, the compass program, and it was at the time Stephen Fry had quite strong criticism of God. How dare you allow a world of suffering and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. How dare you? You know, we didn't do anything to deserve this. How dare you? So it was all God's fault. Many years ago, I was in the Philippines for my work, and I went into this church, and this woman who was there, anyway, we started a conversation. We're having landslides. We've had a volcano erupt. We're having, you know, everything that was going wrong. What's God got against us? That was her conclusion. Had to come from God. And yet we know this comes from, well, mainly human habitation. It's an, you know, there are environmental phenomena, yes. But, you know, there's many, many conditions that come, and none of them are God. I thought it was so unfair to be saying, oh, God's at fault, because then if God's at fault, you sort of feel like you can't do anything. It's very disempowering. Rather than saying, well, what's causing that? Let's have a look and let's, you know, see if we can at least minimize or not have that. So that idea, so here it could be, so that's a, you know, misidentification of the cause. But we also might misidentify it as, I just can't think of an example where you give the wrong cause for something. No, I think of one where there's a wrong cause and you realize, oh, that's not the cause of it at all.
Sometimes with medical diagnosis, they think they can misdiagnose, but sometimes if it has different causes, they'll go, oh, for you it's this one, but
Okay.
then it wasn't that one, it was something else, a different cause.
Yeah.
That's a big
All
vague.
these, sorry,
No, please.
all these stakeholders say for water, the water area, everyone is saying, this is the cause, or that's the cause, or you're the cause, this one's the cause. And nothing happens because there's so much.
The conflict arises, yeah. Yeah.
And they're probably all mistaken.
Well, they'd all be mistaken, yeah.
I think often, all the time, but the identification of the cause is helpful for people to incorrectly blame the cause.
Yes.
So, for example, because then it helps them.
Well, that's actually a perfect example. You made me angry.
Yes.
That's a wrong cause.
And,
I made myself.
and if we go, you know, who's patient 0 for COVID, and I even think back to who was patient 0 for HIV.
Yeah.
It was about identification
Yeah.
of the unmet blame to, there were, you know, it's just a whole narrative around it to
Yes.
make yourself feel better
Yeah.
instead of just.
And people did blame, whereas in reality, identifying for medical purpose is quite valid. But when it becomes, you know, it's their fault and it's their fault.
And it creates that, and I think in the quote you mentioned earlier, is that there's, once there is a self, then there is an idea of other. And
Yeah.
there is that othering, and that's something.
Yeah. 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 We're very good at it.
Very interesting.
I did think of something for wrong cause. When the violent person or the abuser says, look at what you've made me do.
Oh, that's yes, that's definitely. Yes. So there's many of that pointing the finger. It's, yeah.
Sometimes we can misinterpret someone's, I don't know, facial expression or
Yes.
something, and then maybe take offence or
Yeah.
dislike them or something, and then when we actually find out more about them or what happened, we realise, oh, they actually were not
Doing that
anything
at all.
wrong or
Yeah.
a completely different sort of situation, and then
Yeah.
I was angry because of misinterpretation
Yeah,
or upset.
that. I'm just thinking about an example of that from when I was teaching in TAFE, and it was a period when TAFE was, at least this particular one in Sydney, was decided open plan learning is the way to go. So we were in this area, and then there was an English class in that area, and there was a forklift over there in that area, and it was all open, right? The forklifters weren't there, so, but the people going into the English class, so coming and going this way. And I just happened to get the eye of one of them as I was teaching over here, and I've got to think, these are people who are probably refugees and so forth. So very heightened uncertainty or anxiety or so forth. And so I got this, you're staring at me, but I wasn't, but that, it happens to all. That's an example, because I was so shocked, because it's like, you think, that's so not me, but because that was her perception, because probably expecting to be put down, which is tragic, probably expecting that. So yeah, I think we can probably think of a lot of examples. Okay, so we want to be rid of all this, don't we? So abandoning the noble truth of the origin of suffering. Well, we want to be free of suffering. So if the causes are the afflictions and the actions we do created under their influence, how do we get rid of their influence? How do we be free of those afflicted mental states? So one way is that we develop the opposite state of mind. So against anger, what would be the opposite state of mind? Loving kindness, patience. So we cultivate those, or compassion. Yeah. And then against the craving, desirous mind, how do we get rid of that? When we live in the desire realm, big end, it's a desire realm. Understanding impermanence is a really good one, that whatever pleasure I get from that won't last. Another way is working on the mind that over-exaggerates that this will be a source of all my happiness, and realize that I can enjoy it, but not have to be attached to it. I don't have to think it's going to be the source of all my happiness, but enjoy it while it does last. So this is cultivating a mind that's usually said of non-attachment, which doesn't mean detachment, very different, but of relinquishing that mind, grasping at stuff.
There's like a wrong view.
Yeah, must have. I won't be happy without it, without them, without the person, the dream job, the yacht,
But also thinking through, like, the last time I got a new car, at the end of the month, it's like the feeling. That thing of,
when you get a new car, the minute you drive it out of the car yard, it's gone down in value about $3,000 or $4,000.
But I mean how we acclimatise so quickly
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
and it's lost that luster, if you like.
Yeah.
I had a very, very, very swift reminder of the importance of emotion on your car when I purchased my new car, drove out of the car yard. It's not quite as sounds like a cocoon, but just went to the nearby shopping centre, dropped popped in to get something 5 minutes later, there's a ding in my car.
Half an hour. My perfect new car is not perfect.
Thank you. That's a good.
Yeah, and somebody might go use that because that's my brand new car you dinged, you know. It's just like if it was an old bomb, you wouldn't be so worried, but my brand new car.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we escalate that attachment, right? Because it's now my proud possession. Yeah. So yes, so thinking about the faults of attachment, just that it's impermanent, it will not last. Not even half an hour. Well, it still functioned as a car, but just not, just not perfect anymore. And that idea of any object is contaminated, not in terms of its poison, but that it's in the nature of suffering, that it'll lead to suffering, okay, because of being impermanent, because of not lasting and so forth. And then also the uncertainty of the fulfillment of desire. I was so craving that chocolate cake and then I got it and it was yucky, you know, like it wasn't what the eyes told me it was going to be. And thinking that it's not, it relates to the permanence, not truly existent from its own side out there. The deliciousness in the chocolate cake, if I interrogate and pull apart all the, all the ingredients, where's the deliciousness? The deliciousness actually only comes from my own mind. So that's where the mind of attachment is, if we investigate.
But also the root of things that you think that somehow getting this thing, relationship, this whatever, is going to give you this happiness.
Yeah.
And that's kind of being constant.
Yes. Well, I remember in the days I used to listen to the radio, I just thought, every single song's a love song. It's either about falling in love or being heartbroken or taking revenge, or, I mean, in that sort of, that.
Music,
What was that?
country music, good for that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yeah. So we're surrounded by things that create that myth, about the perfect partner and so forth. And I just think having a perfect partner will be unbearable because I can live up to their standards. And we're not thinking about, am I perfect? No, I want my idea of what's perfect, as well. So it totally is, But also on the basis of that attachment, what other afflictive states are on it? Jealousy, because somebody else got that partner, didn't. There's many people who say that. Just about to ask them out. So-and-so came up and, envy, pride, fear, all of that, sense of insecurity, all that comes, all these other negative mind states come on that basis of attachment. And it keeps us, being attachment to being in existence, keeps us in this cycle of, lifetime after lifetime. So experiencing lifetime after lifetime of suffering, which robs us then of experiencing happiness. Yeah.
So really, there's nothing wrong with it except the expectation that it's going to change your level of happiness. In a way.
The expectation. That creates the disappointment. Well, it's based on the fact of being a deluded state of mind, because a mind of attachment over exaggerates what you're going to get from that object. So, it's going to be the dream, whatever, just what I've always wanted, and going to stay the same. When people fall in love, And then when they fall out of love, it's like because you've changed. Well, guess what? So have you. I mean, change happens moment by moment, and sometimes very cataclysmic moments, but change happens. It's the nature of everything. So we don't operate in those moments from the sensible mind that realizes, well, of course we're not going to be together forever. Of course you're going to change. Of course you're going to whatever. Get older, trade you in for a younger model. I don't know why they keep making moves, but I remember somebody in Melbourne, Simon Hopkins, I remember his name, and he looked into the plots of Hollywood movies. He said there's only, was it 6 or 16? Maybe it was only 6 actual plots, and they're just variations in the.
I think it was 6 actually.
Are you 6?
Yeah.
And they just sort of change the names, the century, the whatever, and yeah. It keeps us in. Yeah, I said that. It exaggerates the importance of the object. That's it. Exaggerate the importance. Like if my new car, it's ding. It's the end of my life because I saved long and hard for my new car. It's got to be perfect. I had one of those. I never once had a new car. New car. One of my friends, they labelled my car, you know, because some people give their cars names.
Some people think that's very strange.
I do.
Lots of people do.
Lots of people do. Anyway, my friends gave my car the name when it was brand new. Well, it had driven home, so it wasn't brand new anymore. The Untouchable Girl, because I was like, oh, don't sit on the car. Oh, don't. So they called it the Untouchable Girl. Yeah, that didn't last long either. It can't.
Paradoxically, if you don't have the expectation, you can actually probably enjoy it.
You can exactly. You'll enjoy everything more if you don't have the expectation. Lower your expectation. And let's face it, just saying, I got that car because not that it was permanent, but my friends who had that car lasted 14 years. So I want a car that lasts 14 years. I mean, it was just a practical thing. It wasn't, don't you dare, scratch the surface. So our fixation, cars, whatever, inevitably leads to disappointment, but also stops us from, getting caught up in worldly affairs, basically, stops us from then actually gaining the realizations of the path, of generating a mind, particularly the first one of renunciation, which doesn't mean giving away all your possessions, but it means relinquishing that mind of attachment, the must-have mind. And so that maybe starts with the car and then goes to, even being in existence, which is pretty freaky. You get a bit terrified. And it's said that those beings, as they're coming to that direct perceptual realization of emptiness, of inherent existence, which means realizing that everything is, even at the most subtle level, is entirely interdependent, everything. And so when you have that and you cut through, if you like, all those, the root ignorance, which then cuts through all those afflicted states of mind, so you don't experience them again. So that's the mind of renunciation. And you're free. You have a sense of freedom. So even we say, well, I haven't quite got there yet. It's a mind in sync with reality. So a mind in sync with reality is completely free. So we can have tastes of that, experiences of that, where we are, allowing that freedom. And then your life's so much more
Always easy.
easy. Yeah,
Quality.
easy. In the zone, as they say, you know, that sports people talk about being in the zone. It's sort of like all resistance has fallen.
Even the traffic lights turn green.
Well, there you go. But if they don't, that's okay. Because at some time I'm going to encounter a red light. And that's
Yeah.
fine. I can do Dharma practice at the lights. Yes.
I went on a retreat, and when I was up 10 days, I was coming out of the retreat, and someone was driving me home because I couldn't get the car. But encountering a traffic light for the first time after 10 days, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was, you know, it has lights and it's a stick. And it was like,
You went deep.
it took me a while to go, oh, yeah, it's a traffic light. But it was really an interesting perception.
Yeah.
Of seeing this object.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember once after a 10-day retreat how to put petrol in my car.
So when one goes on retreat, just note to self, allow some transition.
Well, there have been in but that's true.
Allow some,
Like,
ease yourself
it's
up.
like waters, it's like, isn't this work?
Yeah.
Yeah, allow the transition. Yeah, it's a good point because you're going from that more subtle level of mind to, you know,
Yeah.
abrupt, you know, emerging maybe too abruptly or whatever, depending on. So I'm guessing if you're at the lights, you eventually figured it out. And,
I wasn't driving.
oh, good. You
Someone
went off.
finally picked me up
Good.
and taking me back. But I was just sitting in the passenger side going, I'm experiencing this, but I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, because you also can become highly sensitized to like sounds and
Yeah.
smells and things. So yeah, one needs to be, have that time. I think somebody was saying that recently, I was reading recently about not having that time coming out of a retreat. So yeah. So what we're wanting to cultivate is the mind, that mindfulness. Did you see in the newsfeed, Bhutan's creating a city of mindfulness?
It looks more beautiful.
In Bhutan, they're trying to lure back all those Bhutanese who come to Perth, to Australia, lure them back, and so they can do their. It's a sort of like eco-friendly everything, you know, business and this and that. So yeah, everything, you know, education, health, business. Take off. It's to know about the Bhutanese, but of course you read. Anyway, develop mindfulness. So, in other words, the awareness, like the awareness of our mind of attachment and grafting and whatever other afflictions we have. And of course, the wisdom that's in sync with reality, that sees things as they are, as we say, gives us a sense of freedom, gives us a sense of peace, of bliss. And, you know, that reveals the mistakes that we made in our afflictions, like analysing the ingredients of the cake or where the newness of the car is. So it must have been in the shape and shininess before the ding happened. That was the new.
I have to say, Auntie Claire, I shouldn't have pride in this, but I at the time, I went, that's a good reminder. So
That's what lamas I would call wholesome pride.
yes,
It's okay to have wholesome pride, not overinflated ego pride, but it goes, thank you. Wonderful. Excellent. So it's what we talk about, you know, the more that we practice that sort of mindfulness, that we get a sense of disenchantment. a weariness, as Lama Tsongkhapa, weariness with cyclic existence, a disenchantment with our craving and ignorance. So, for example, one phrase that sticks in my mind is Lama Zopa Rinpoche saying, we have tasted all the tastes there are in Samsara. And you think, there's nothing new, you know. Of course, we could counter it with, but I haven't tasted it in this one. And it's just down the road. But to realize that we've been there, we've done it all. Yeah.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking, how can I apply that thinking in my day to day?
Yeah.
If I experience moments that I'm perceiving as sort of, you know, negative,
Yes.
and instead of narrating, creating a long story of what I've experienced.
Yes. Yeah.
So I can use it in that.
Absolutely. And so the mindfulness that shines the light of awareness on that as soon as possible before it starts to hijack your mind. It's just like, interesting. My mind of attachment arises a lot, but every instance that we catch it, and we rejoice in that and think, oh, gotcha. I can see it. I can see what you're doing. Not going there. Or any other mind, the mind of anger. Why do I want to make myself so unhappy? Even though, as His Holiness Dalai Lama said, with the scientists talking about low self-esteem, why would a human being do that to themselves? Now, until I heard that, I never thought this low self-esteem is something you do to yourself. But of course it is. No. Oh, no. It's all those people putting me down. Well, I could have my healthy sense of myself in the conventional sense. So of course we have, it's not that we don't have self, that's where you get into danger. Conventionally, we have a sense of self. And I found that with meditating, even just meditating on the breath, there's a sense of inner resilience, isn't it? The sort of inner strength. And then it's okay. So we have this quote from Geshe Ben-Gun Gal. So Geshe Ben-Gun Gal, there's lots of stories about him. In Liberation of the Palm of the Hand, there's one story about him, and it relates to this, where he his sponsor was coming, and so he did all the beautiful offerings on the altar, and then he checked his mind. He made it look beautiful because his sponsor's coming, and then he checked his mind and thought, oh, that's my ego, that's my pride mind. So he got a handful of dust and threw it over the offering. And another time, because he'd been, prior to meeting the Dharma, he'd been a thief. And another time there's a story where he was in, these people, you know, he was in their house and they're in the next room. And he saw his hand going towards the tea caddy. And he grabbed his hand and he called out, thief, 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 there's a thief in the house, there's a thief in the house. And they all come running. And he's holding his hand, there's a thief in the house. So this is all about training the mind to be aware of those instances. So he said, I guard the entrance to the fortress of my mind with a spear, which is the antidotes, or knowing what antidote. Guard the entrance to the fortress of my mind with a spear, their antidotes. At no time am I not doing this. So constantly having that vigilance. When delusions are at the ready, so am I. And when they relax, so do I. So we don't have to be always, oh, there's another one coming. oh, just like, okay. Just enjoy yourself. But when that disturbing state of mind, as soon as we can shine the light on it, and then we're like, ha, got you. And we just keep practicing like that. And we just keep practicing. And even just shining the light on it weakens it. It's like we have, you know, with the 4-class applications of mindfulness, you know, mindfulness of thoughts, where everybody says the same thing. Well, I sat there and they all ran away. There weren't any thoughts there because they didn't want their light, you know, sort of go into hiding. But as soon as we're not doing that, blah, 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 when we don't, so, I'm going to interrogate you. Where have you gone? So with sneaky minds, we have to get familiar with them. Okay. Any other questions, observations, contributions?
I don't really have a question formed, but
yeah,
just going back about attachment and relationships, you know, love.
Mm-hmm.
Like if the attachment's with a chocolate cake, it's kind of simpler for me to understand.
Okay, yeah.
But if it's attachment in the context of a relationship with another person,
yeah, it's very hard.
It's like, you know, with our motivation, for example, going into a relationship, will it be like something to benefit that other person, but we also have to benefit ourselves and
well, it might be, yeah. I think going, yeah.
Relationship isn't the, you know, it won't sort of make me happy. Like, yeah, it's just trying to.
So I guess what we say is the definition of love is may you be happy.
Yeah.
May you have the causes of happiness. And we think, oh, but I may not be the cause of your happiness. You know, we might trip ourselves up around all of that. Whereas if within a relationship, and doesn't have to be an intimate relationship, any relationship, your concern is more about what I can give rather than what I can take. So take's different to just mutual experience, you know. Mm-hmm. So what can I get out of it? So it's really counteracting the mind of what can I get out of this, you know? Yeah. Like, oh, they've got a brand new car. Stay in this one. I think they've got a brand new car. They've got rich parents or they're rich or whatever. You know, that's very clear. That's a very crude level. But I think as long as it, basically the relationship is based on love, respect, tolerance, then yeah.
And then sometimes feels like, you know, other people, they don't want you to just sort of, they want you to enjoy something from them.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's rather.
But that's giving them a happiness.
Yeah. So rather than like taking like take small, like if something happens, you can enjoy it in the moment.
You can enjoy it in the moment. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, enjoy it in the moment. And I mean, I think, you know, again, I'm not a relationship expert, clearly, but what in that thought. See, it runs away when you want it. But oh, it's definitely gone. Yeah.
I could give you a moment pause.
Yeah.
When my husband was really, really unwell, and he made a great deal of spiritual progress as he became closer to dying. And he started to keep a little notebook in his writing. So one of the things that he realised, sometimes to be kind to other people, you have to let them do things. And I think he was getting quite physically frail, and like he'd been very independent, like a big strong biker man. But, you know, he had to let people do all sorts of things for him. But he turned that around in his mind where they were offering and he was accepting. And his acceptance was kindness.
Yeah, that's a good example. I thought of my example.
Oh.
So it's
Oh, it hasn't gone again.
So we might, say, they say, oh, what would you like to do? And you say, oh, you choose, because you want to make them happy, right? But then after a while, it's uncomfortable, because they were like, yeah, don't you, isn't there something that you like or something? Yes, yeah. So that's, yeah, you just got to participate, because otherwise, are you participating in this relationship or what?
Give and take.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a misery. Yeah. Beyond that, go and see a relationship person and talk to the other people around. That's as far as I can go. Alrighty. So there's no class next week, is it?
No.
Because we're with with Jada Rinpoche is going to be in town teachings. I did want to mention, and then I go to Bunbury after that.
Are you teaching on the 18th?
I'm teaching, 18th, so just not next week. And of course, if people haven't heard that, our teacher, Geshe Sultan from Chenrezig Institute, will be here on Tuesday night, and it's just like an introduction, get to know Geshe, or Q&A, just a sort of relaxed. So 7:30 on Tuesday.
And he's a real people person.
He's a very much
as well as being very kind and pure, he's a real people person.
So Geshe Sultan likes to say his favourite thing is to stay at home and read Lamas or Kappa, but I'm a very social Geshe, so then I go out, which is wonderful. Dalai Lama did tell the Geshes in Melbourne one time to get out of their ivory towers, go and engage with the real world. He's actually here for the teachings with Jada Rinpoche, so he's here for a couple of weeks, but it's only really then that he's got a little bit of time. But however, I said to the people who come, do you come to the Tuesday morning meditation? Not usually. Anyway, so my intent is to bring him over and to show him the Gombra, and then we're going to go to lunch, so if anybody wants to join us. About 11:30 on Tuesday as well. That's unless they decide they want to, recover from the fact that they just lost a couple of hours coming across Australia. Okay, so page 8, dedications. Gewadi Nududa Lama Sangit Gune Towachi Kamalupa De Sala Gopa Shu Chanchu Central Rinpoche Make Panam Ke Kuchi Ke Panya Me Paya Gonye Gonyu Kawashu. Page 9, the prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling joy, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And pray for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And a long life prayer for Tenzin also Rinpoche. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, foremost and holy Lama, to you, Christ Supreme, we make this prayer supplication. The Lama, please, please, with one. So I also wanted to mention, just a moment, let's do this.